I did.
There it goes.
There it goes.
That's going.
You're about 10 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
That's bad but true.
Hello, I'm Roger Harris. Thank you for tuning in. Betsy Wills has grandma duties today, so I'm her substitute teacher. The rest of our regular crew are here. Mike Philback, Wes Westmoreland, and Andy Debman. All right, gentlemen, let's get started. For months, President Biden repeatedly promised that he would not pardon his son, Hunter, for tax and gun offenses. But then last Sunday, that's exactly what he did. It was a broad pardon for any federal offenses Hunter may have committed during the last 11 years. President Biden said in a statement, "No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son." What do you think, gentlemen? Was the pardon justified? And secondly, does the Hunter Biden pardon give Donald Trump political cover to issue other questionable pardons? Wes, get us started.
Well, I'll start with the first point. I don't think any of us can blame a man for saving his son and securing his freedom. Didn't like it, but I won't blame the man for that. I do think the way that Hunter has been raised with never being responsible for his actions has been a big part of those continuing problems. But the most troubling thing is the fact that the president lied about it. Everyone knew he was lying about it. Every time he said he wasn't going to pardon him, everybody knew he was going to. But, you know, we've come to expect that from President Biden. I do think it was a very broad pardon. Everything that he could have done over the last 11 years, and I think that potentially helps the president himself with questions about Burisma, Ukraine, China, questions that really need to be answered. And apparently, news this week out of the White House, there's talk that they may do preemptive pardons for Tony Fauci and others. That's disturbing. But Mr. Harris, the final point, the hand-wringing by the Democrats when the Supreme Court ruled that the president, like every other elected official in America, has a degree of immunity for official acts, now sounds even more hollow than it did then. The hypocrisy of the left never ceases to amaze me.
Andy, what are your views?
Not his.
Somewhat different than mine, I'm sure.
Somewhat.
Well, you know, as a father, I understand that part. And I've yet to hear anybody that criticized him for doing it for his son. Even Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama said, "I don't have any problems with that, just I wish he'd not lied about it." And I think that's the real crux. I don't think anybody has any qualms about saving his kid. I don't think there's anybody that will hold, if anybody would hold any kind of grudge about that, they're probably not a parent, so they don't understand. But I feel like I wish he hadn't continually said that he wasn't going to do it. I wish he would have kind of moved around, been a little bit, maybe a little wiggy worm on it or something, to where
A lot of times politicians say, "I have no plans to."
and that
whatever.
would have worked fine. And I don't think this would be anything. But this is my real concern. He has give Donald Trump all the fig leaves he needs to pardon every one of those on January 6th, every one of them. And it's going to be hard to come back and say that he was wrong. And even though Donald Trump has never said he wouldn't do it that I'm aware of, he's kind of moved around the subject and kind of hinted at it and backed up and so forth. But, you know, this is the thing that this is just, and I told Mike this, I think on the way out the door, Biden just gave Trump a big middle finger. It's what I think he did.
Waved at him, didn't use all his fingers.
Yeah, he didn't use all his fingers. And I think that's basically what it was. And to the Republicans, that, and I think maybe a little bit, maybe to some of the Democrats, he felt like treated him unfairly, forcing him out. So this might be a collective own your house, people, and just that's what I tend to think. Maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit, but there's a lot of hard feelings, I think, because let's face it, Joe Biden has worked for this country and the Democratic Party for a long time, and this is what his legacy is going to end up being.
And that's sad.
It is sad.
Mike?
Well, as I told the gentleman from Earl when he told me Biden gave the middle finger to Trump and the Republicans, he also gave the middle finger to his own Justice Department because he said his own Justice Department mistreated his own youngin.
It was a big finger bite.
But you know, Roger, as you alluded to, that's the most comprehensive pardon by an American president since Richard Nixon was pardoned by Gerald Ford.
And that was an exceptional circumstance.
It was.
Very much so.
But actually, for a long time, Hunter did get special treatment of not being prosecuted, and then the evidence just got so overwhelming that I think Biden's own Justice Department really had no choice, or they were going to lose some credibility. We don't know what his sentences would have been now because they won't happen.
But don't you think the gun charge was a little bit overwrought? Because unfortunately,
It
there's
may.
a whole bunch of guns that
Well,
go through
I have another,
airports,
here's
and it's
another
not
thought.
right.
Y'all think about this. Burisma, and the big guy gets 10%. Joe Biden's not out of the woods once he's out of office. He may well be charged unless he pardons himself or Trump pardons him.
And the interesting thing, now it would be very difficult for Hunter to claim the Fifth Amendment because he can't be prosecuted for anything he did.
Well, he can, and there'll be
I didn't
civil.
think about that, but that's a
There'll
point.
be civil suits possibly to come on Hunter, and he has to testify because he can't claim the Fifth.
Right.
And so that could happen. But back to him being a dad, I certainly do get, as the father of 3 boys and a daughter, that if I could help my son and I thought they had overcome themselves, nobody was really, hurt, wasn't a murder or anything, I get that part. As Roger said, he could have said something like, I have no plans to pardon every time, instead of, no, I'm not going to pardon him, and yes, I'm going to let the verdict stand. That's what makes him look like just your typical lying politician, and that's unfortunate on his way out. But, and he did, Roger, I think, he has, as Andy alluded, whether it's January 6th or others, he has opened the door where it'll be hard for the media to say a lot about Trump's pardons that they're not saying about Biden's.
And I don't disagree with anything that was said. As a dad, I understand the dilemma that he was in. And Biden has some particular circumstances even within his family. He lost a 1-year-old daughter in an auto accident in 1972. That same accident took his first wife, and that left him with 2 sons from that marriage. And then his son, Bo, died of brain cancer at age 46. That leaves him with 1 surviving son from that first marriage, and that son has battled drug addiction for years. And at 82 years old, the thought of having to visit your son in a prison in your last years, that's going to be hard. But the reality is, when you become president, you put the office and the country above everything. That is the job. You know that going in. And the danger I see is the precedent. There's a lot of people who believe already that there's 2 justice systems in this country. There's one for the rich and powerful, and then one for everybody else. And, Andy, our side has argued for years that Democrats stood for the rule of law. That was our position. That was our argument. But the rhetoric, and I agree with Mike, the rhetoric I see in the White House statement looks like it could have been written by Trump. It's the same thing. When we look at Trump and Biden, those 2 men are in agreement that the Justice Department is rigged.
That's the way I see it, and you know, and that's what I keep going back. I've always had a weakness for Joe Biden, but I hate to see at his age going out of office with a certain amount of dementia. Now he's got this hanging over him. I mean, he's just wiped out an entire lifetime of service to this country.
That was his whole career. He plagiarized. He's lost the
Oh, my.
presidential
Come
election
on.
over and over. This is typical Biden.
Oh, Wes.
Well, but the Biden pardon does make Trump's actions look sort of like business as normal.
Yeah.
You know, in his first administration when he pardoned, oh goodness, Steve Bannon and Michael Flynn and Charles Kushner and all those guys, you know, we had some fodder there, but now it looks like it's just business as usual.
Yeah.
And it does give Trump some cover, I think, to pardon the January 6th insurrectionists.
I think so.
And those pardons are intended to deal with very specific, very clean issues where an injustice was done or where someone, like we saw with Nixon, the country just needs to move on. It's not intended to give everybody a free pass.
Right. And we remember with the Nixon pardon, Gerald Ford paid a political penalty for that.
Oh,
A couple
absolutely.
years later.
Absolutely.
And it could be that Democrats may have to pay a political penalty in a couple of years. You know, during those off elections, ordinarily, the party out of the White House would do well, but we don't know how this will play and what kind of legs this has. All right, well, gentlemen, let's move on to the second question. There's some big changes coming to Jones Street in Raleigh. Some key leaders from previous years are gone. Speaker Tim Moore's going to Washington. The new Republican Speaker of the House is Destin Hall from Caldwell County. What do we know about Speaker Hall? And for the last 10 years, Dan Blue has been the Democratic Party leader in the North Carolina Senate. Senator Blue has been a Democratic icon in North Carolina politics for goodness, about 40 years. The Senate Democratic Caucus elected Sidney Batch from Wake County as minority leader this week. What do we know about her? So Andy, talk to us about this new day at the General Assembly.
Well, here's the thing we need to know about Representative Destin Hall. He is going to be the youngest speaker on record that I'm aware of. But even more importantly, like I've always said, follow the Benjamins. He raised $2.8 million in this election cycle. If you want to know how he becomes speaker, you raise $2.8 million and you spread it around, you got a lot of friends. You got friends. And that really, I mean, that's the way it's been for quite some time, since the mid-90s. I mean, it's who can raise the money. Just like when I was there, Jim Black could raise the money. He basically started as a young man with optometry practice in downtown Charlotte, and he knew all those bankers that ended up being the major financiers in the whole world that he could raise money from. That's what it boils down to, is who can do that. And the question I've got is, what is his real ideas about where he wants to take that chamber? Now, he has talked about making it the schedule more reliable so people could have a life outside. That's been an ongoing thing forever, and it never really works out. I mean, if you got somebody that's all they're interested in is being in Raleigh, they're going to bring all their people with them. And that's the problem, because you've got too many people that still have a life outside that place, Roger, and it's hard to keep it together like that. Now, Dan Blue, I mean, I've not had much respect for Dan since 1998 when he helped lead a insurrection with his Republican friends to try to block Jim Black from being speaker. I'll never remember that day. I was sitting there in seat number 12 with my, at that time, little girl Victoria on my lap, literally. And all that broke loose. And I said, holy moly, what are we into now? And that was something that I really have had a lot of problem in. It was nothing but a power play. He wanted the power. And that's one reason why he finally left the House and went to the Senate, because he didn't have a path to power there. So he said, well, as he called them, the House of Lords on numerous occasions, he decided he'd go across the reflecting pond and see what he could do over there. And Martin Nesbitt also left at the time and went with him over there. And it just...
Oh, I didn't remember that. They went at the same time.
Yeah, they went about the same time. And I think when they found out, they got over there, and people weren't ready just to roll over for them. But then, after a bunch of Democrats got stomped, and there wasn't a whole lot left, and he became the leader. Now, I don't know anything about this young lady. She's only been there a couple terms. You know, I've always heard old saying, a new broom sweeps the cleanest. So maybe they think this might be a way to get a little younger leadership in place.
She's 45 instead of 75-year-old Blue. There's a big difference
That's
there.
looking awful young now to me.
Yeah. All right. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Destin Hall will do a great job. I've listened to him as rules chairman talk. He was, I believe, chairman of the redistricting committee as well last year.
I think so.
When they got the districts drawn, you'd realize if North Carolina hadn't gotten 3 new Republicans, the Democrats would have a 218, 217 majority in the House. Those 3 we switched here were big for the Republicans. But I think Destin will do great. He's 37. You mentioned how young he is. He's 37. Was first elected in 2016, graduate of App State. Got his law degree from Wake Forest. That wasn't cheap unless he got scholarships, was it? And he's got a lot of energy. He's sharp. I've just don't really know the gentleman other than through Tim a little bit, but I think he'll do fine. Ms. Batch is not known to me before this week, to be honest with you. I wouldn't have known who she was. But it's her second term, but she was appointed in 2021 by Cooper and then ran in 2022 and this year.
And she also had a term in
She
the
had
House.
a term in the
before
House
that.
prior to that. But then she lost that to Aaron Paray, a Republican, and so then Cooper appointed her. So I withhold judgment, but I'd almost be willing to bet you she's 30 years younger than Blue and 30 degrees to the left of him.
Well, Wes, before we go to you, let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Shara Miller, the host of Artworks. Each month we bring to you wonderful, talented artists from here in Cleveland County and the region. We have artists, we have potters, we have painters, we have musicians, we have actors. We just have wonderful artists that come to you and tell you about all that they're doing, their creativity, what inspires them. Join me here on Artworks each month on C19. You can also watch us online at c19.tv.
Probably not. I have to study for my exams next week, and my dad would kill me.
I can't make it. I've got a big game tomorrow night. I want to make sure I'm in good shape.
No, I'm good. I don't want to get in trouble. My parents would kill me.
Nah, I gotta fill out scholarship applications.
Everyone has at least one good reason to stay away from drugs and alcohol. Find your reason today and get back to enjoying life.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some new leadership in Jones Street and the changes in the General Assembly. And of course, there's also a 71 seat instead of 72 seat majority in the House. Wes, what are your views?
Well, I do think the dynamic in Raleigh is going to change. You know, Tim Moore's been the longest serving speaker in North Carolina history of either party. That's pretty substantial direction in the House. You have similar with Phil Berger, the pro tem in the Senate, and now the minority leader position changing. Andy, I remember when Senator Blue was in the House, but not as vividly as you do. I served in the Senate with him, and I found him to be a very reasonable individual that I could have a conversation with, very careful arguments for or against the bill, and relatively easy to work with. I'm not sure that Senator Batch will bring the same dynamic, and that's going to really, I'm afraid we're going to see more divisive politics in the Senate. Senator Berger has led that body for so long, and I think had a working relationship with Senator Blue and members of the caucus. Don't know that we're going to see quite that ability to work together in spite of how the votes are going to go.
And I don't know Senator Batch. I'd really never heard of her until this week. I did read that one of her big issues is health care. She's a breast cancer survivor, and you know, hope that she will continue to monitor that. All right, let's move on to our last question. When I was a substitute on this program last time, we talked about Donald Trump's cabinet, and at the time we were focusing on Matt Gaetz and his challenges. And I wondered out loud at that time if all the clowns were out of the car. Well, Donald Trump found some more bozos in the back seat. This week, the future president has said that he has selected Kash Patel to lead the world's premier law enforcement agency, the FBI, and that's going to require the current FBI director, Christopher Wray, who was also appointed by Trump, to either resign or be fired. There's major questions about Patel's qualifications, other than the fact that he's an ardent supporter of the president-elect. In a recent interview, he said that he would shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopen it the next day as a museum to the deep state, whatever in the world that is. What do you think, gentlemen? Will Patel go the way of Matt Gaetz, or will the Senate confirm him? Mike, get us started.
Well, Mr. Harris, as Wes calls you, Roger, I think it's a bit harsh to say Kash Patel is a bozo in the back seat.
He might be in the front seat now.
If you listen to him, he makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you what's given me pause to say, let's wait and see what happens. One of the people I've admired a lot for a long time is Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina. And he is ardently for Kash Patel and says he's just what the FBI needs, that it needs to be cleaned out. And he's known it since he was there. So that gives me some pause for thought. I don't know a lot about him. I have listened to him just on little blurbs on TV. But whether he will go the way of Matt Gaetz, as you ask, or not, it's going to depend on how the meetings go with the GOP senators. He can't lose but 3 and have Vance break the tie unless he gains a Democrat. So at any rate, I think that will probably, I think he's 50-50, maybe a little more or minus to get confirmed. But he is one of the more controversial ones along with Hexas.
Wes?
I'll put him just over 50-50. I think he'll be confirmed, but you know, you call the FBI, what'd you say, the premier law enforcement agency? There may be one person at this desk that believes that. I certainly don't. People are tired of the weaponization that we have seen, and at some point we've got to clean this stuff up. Hopefully Patel is the one to do it. If not, I'm sure there'll be somebody else. But we've got to restore confidence, public confidence in these agencies.
Andy?
It's kind of hard to instill confidence. That's when the president-elect's got his hit list of everybody, and all his people, or most of the people that he's wanting to put in, are saying, we're going to even scores. These people, first day, we're going to march them out.
Y'all been wringing your hands since the election started.
Yes, he said it. He said it repeatedly. And a lot of
democracy survives.
But they still are saying it, and that is something that we should not tolerate in this country. I mean, just don't do it. Now, I don't know a thing about this guy. I don't know his background. I don't know if he's qualified to run this particular department. I don't know if he has a law enforcement background of any sort. I mean,
he's got very little law enforcement
experience. This is something that you need somebody with some experience in law enforcement, and I find it hard to believe that President-elect Trump can't find somebody. I just find that hard to believe, because that's always been one of his big deals, was to try to do something with the FBI and the Attorney General's office. So I just find that hard to believe this is the best he can come up with. I think he's starting to find that there is going to be pushback on some of these that are just so far out there that it just makes no sense. So he's got some people trying to make him look better than what he's acting in a lot of ways. And I hope there's some other people that he's had some that I thought were reasonable, like for 90 Nations, and and that lady for Attorney General, she has got a background. She has been Attorney General in Florida for a number of years, so she at least does have the background to do the job. Some of these will go through. I don't think there'll be some discussion, but then they'll get, and because I've always said, the president, unless it's somebody just a real whack job, should get the people they want for their offices. I just really think that for their cabinet, and I've always believed that. So then that's where the Senate comes in to advise and consent, and I think we're starting to see that some of that they are quietly doing that. So I have hope for that.
Well, and let's not forget, and then I'll be quiet, we're talking about people to run major agencies, huge organizations. The law enforcement experience in that seat is less critical to me than the ability to handle a large agency and handle people. He can hire law enforcement people.
All right, let's go on to our lightning round then. Wes?
Well, in a last-minute move, designed to thwart the will of the voters, the Social Security Administration Commissioner Martin O'Malley, appointed by President Joe Biden, signed a deal with the American Federation of Government Employees this week, guaranteeing that the entity's 42,000 employee members will not have to come into office when Donald Trump is sworn in. I'm afraid we're going to expect more of this from the Biden administration in the closing days.
All right.
I don't know what to say to that.
I don't
Roger.
either. I just, we had such a smooth transition the last time.
So let's just tell the employees they don't have to show up for work anymore, but we'll still pay them. Go figure.
All right, Andy?
Well, the only thing I've got a little local thing. You know, we've always liked high school football around here, and well, unfortunately, Roger Crest lost last week, but that was a heck of a game, though. But
And a heck of a season.
It was, and Shelby is the last man standing from Cleveland County, and I wish them well tonight as we record this on a Friday. They're just 2 games away, I believe, to the state championship again. So let's wish them the best.
Right.
I heard my friend Guy Suttle say on their football show that in his opinion, this is the biggest test Shelby will have if they were to beat Monroe at home. He thinks they might win the state championship.
Well, I certainly hope so. I like those trophies in green and gold, but any trophy for Cleveland County is a good trophy. So good luck, Shelby Lions. We hope you bring back the
That
gold.
wasn't my lightning round.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah.
Our first president was George Washington. We've got a picture here of a famous portrait of him. It's with his horse in 1777 winter at Valley Forge. Everybody knows a lot about Washington, but what a lot of folks don't know, Washington thought political parties would become the doing away of America. Here's just a portion of his farewell speech about that. In his farewell address in 1796, he said, "The spirit of party," by which he meant political parties, "serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration. It agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms. It kindles the animosity of one party against another, foments occasional riot and insurrection." Washington rests his case.
And yet the Hamiltonians and the Jeffersonians out of Washington drew into our 2 parties.
They did.
But he did. He saw the dangers there. You might remember in the wake of the hurricane that destroyed western North Carolina, that far-right Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene claimed that the federal government controls the weather. Elena Garcia has introduced legislation to prohibit machines that alter the weather. Mrs. Garcia is a MAGA, naturally, state senator from Florida, naturally. Her bill would make it a misdemeanor, punishable by up to $10,000 fine for using a machine to change the weather. Her bill specifically prohibits devices that influence the temperatures, weather patterns, or sunlight intensity. Mrs. Garcia, I have a message from my 2 youngest grandsons. If you could set that machine to give us 8 inches of snow by Monday, they have your bail money covered in their piggy bank. Do your best. Thank you for tuning in. It's always a joy to be with you. We hope that you can join us again next week. And as you do your Christmas shopping, remember to buy from your local businesses and merchants. Have a good week.
Hello, I'm Tony Fogelman, Vice President of Workforce Development here at Cleveland Community College, and you're watching C19 TV, broadcast service courtesy of Cleveland Community College.